Welcome to the Audiation in the Wild podcast with your hosts, Beau Taillefer and Eric Rasmussen. Season 3, Episode 2, It's All About That Bass.
Well, Eric, we made it to Season 3. I believe we're on Episode 2 here.
Yeah. I don't know what it
Go
means,
us.
but yeah. We're a living example of grit.
Yeah. You know, in regards to this kind of New Year's celebration and, 3 years on the podcast or 3 seasons here, the one thing I wanted to talk about before we get into our episode today, and I was talking with a student about this, is just this, how essential this mindset of consistency is towards, being a musician, but specifically towards audiation, because some of these skills, like these harmonic skills and these improv skills, you're not developing them in a week. It doesn't matter how much practice. You can practice your ass off. Like you get 16 hours a day for a week, and it's not enough. Like you really need time to let this stuff sink in. And I was speaking with a teacher this morning about this, and it's this age-old adage or cliche that a little bit every day really does outperform these like huge waves of and spurts of motivation. And I say this because by the time this is aired, we're probably going to be getting close to the end of January, and people have all these ideas for changing their teaching and changing their own playing. And it's not necessarily that complicated. Like sometimes I see people who are on the right path. They're doing the harmonic learning sequence stuff. They're doing Gordon's, LSAs and rhythm patterns. And maybe they're getting frustrated because it's not happening fast enough, but you really actually don't have to do a lot of this stuff in any single day to reap benefits. You just have to stay consistent with it over long periods of time. And that's something that I reflect on a lot.
Persistence,
right?
Grit, resilience.
And so, Angela Duckworth has talked about this in the context of grit, but grit has this idea of like, it's going to suck with it. And I think the harmonic stuff is a great example. 3 minutes of listening to like a little track where it's like comparing 1 and 5 or 151 to 141 or whatever you're working on. It doesn't even matter the exact content, but stuff like that, 2 or 3 minutes a day of that, you do that for a couple of years, like you'll have smoke in ears. But it's not something you can develop today, no matter how hard you try. And that, I think there's a disconnect in these two mindsets, this kind of go big or go home mindset. It's useful when you have tons of motivation. When you have tons of motivation, write a sonata, go nuts.
Yeah, if you don't like it, don't commit yourself to doing it every day unless it's like worthy of your time, like
sure.
Doing the dishes, if you don't like it, but put on great music. Mm-hmm. and do the dishes, or put on, your child laughing when they were 2 years old. Do the dishes and play that, or a recording of them going to bed, or, motivate, have other things that kind of make it more fun to do the nasty stuff. For you and I, this is always looked forward to. Maybe not the night before, sure. When you're up late, or, but it's like, there's lots of books out there, self-help books, find your joy and just stick with sure. your joy, whatever that is. Most of our music teachers, we love music. Do we love the teaching of music as much? Some of us, if we had the opportunity, would you quit to be a musician if you could make the money? Or do you,
I probably still want to teach.
I don't.
I think I would for sure.
That's all I can do. It's not that good.
But I thought it was a good. Yeah. I thought it was a good point to bring up, because in the MLT community specifically, when the light is shined on your mind in terms of what we're talking about here and its impact on teaching and your own learning, your motivation can just explode through the roof, because you're basically having an epiphany. You're having an epiphany that shows you that maybe the way you were learning yourself and teaching, it made no sense in terms of how people actually learn to audiate, and audiation is kind of bastardized into ear training, which is a red alarm in my mind for the fact that someone may not know what they're talking about. Maybe they do.
Yeah, for sure. But
maybe they do, but often it's a giveaway that they don't. But yeah, I mean, I just see this in the MLT community, even like people reach out to me and they're hot on learning like this harmony stuff and their motivation is really high. And when your motivation's high, I mean, you can run a marathon, like you are ready to go. But that type of motivation that when it's passion, it generally remains consistent over long periods of time. But I mean, you got to be careful when you're all jacked up and you start making crazy plans for yourself. Like I'm going to study harmony for like 45 minutes a day or 2 hours. You got to be careful when you make that goal. If your motivation's really high and it's naturally going to fall and grow, 6 weeks it goes down and then it goes back up. I mean, setting big goals like that can be kind of demoralizing once you realize you can't stick with it. And I've seen people do much better with like a couple minutes of working on harmony. Like, okay, I make my coffee in the morning, I go downstairs and I play some functions for myself that I'm trying to train in my ear. It's just a couple minutes, but I stuck with that for a few years. And on top of that, when I'm feeling pretty jazzed up, I just blast off and just play for an hour or whatever. But this little consistency and working on something that's hard, especially in relation to how sleep integrates with learning, which we were talking about recently on the podcast. I mean, there's kind of a superpower once you can unlock that. Once you get behind that philosophy that it's not necessarily about 3-hour practice sessions. It's more about
in terms of self-improvement of your own audiation to, audiate these, harmonies and, bass lines, which we're going to get into.
Yeah.
Bass
but
lines
I find that very inspiring.
And all that. Yeah.
I find it super inspiring. And part of this for me is like, piano is a secondary instrument for me. It's not my main instrument, but I'm trying to see how good I can get at piano this year. I'm mainly learning like little Bach things, inventions and stuff like that. I'm not a professional piano player, but I'm just practicing 15 minutes a day. That's the ceiling. I'm not practicing more than that. And I want to see how efficient I can get, using this stuff. And that adds up. There's no doubt that if you're actually working on things that are a little difficult for you and you're not just playing, that compounds over time. And, I think that just like learning to sing, helps your audiation. I think learning a second instrument outside of the normal instrument you learn can be so good for you. You just totally get out of, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, Eric. Like you get in trumpet ruts. I get in, like fretboard ruts. I see everything is put through this filter of the guitar neck, and breaking free of that into another instrument can just flip how you view things. So that's my rant.
Yeah, no, I totally get
today.
it. I was playing duets with my trumpet buddy last night, and just a really good friend, hanging out, talking by the fire, and then we go downstairs, and boy, we were just awful. We read stuff that we knew, and then we read stuff, totally sight reading some stuff, and it's almost the same chords or same rhythms and same. There's a guy that wrote for, I forget which big band it was, but he wrote these duets that are really, really kind of cool. But my goodness, we couldn't play last night, and we're usually pretty good. They're decent. This is just painful. It's like all I want to do then is come home and read, get that stuff into my ear. It's like, where are the recordings to this? Can I listen to the recording before I play it? Because that would be so much easier. We know what we're going for.
I used to have this program.
Because we're not audiating. We're not actually audiating what we see on the page. We're deciphering, because that's how we got taught.
I mean, you're probably auditing the rhythm at this point. You're probably just not auditing all the...
Anyway, the audiation is not good enough.
I used to have this program and I still have it, I just don't use it. All my friends used it when we were younger, Guitar Pro. And it provided sheet music and tabs, which we were mainly interested in when we were playing like rock music. But it was a computer playing it, but it was so useful because you could have the computer play a few bars for you and then practice it, and then have the computer, and you were actually modeling something real. You weren't just, staring at the tab. And that's, a lot of people knock tabs and they're like, oh, it's not as good as notation. But if you look at the way guitarists interact with tabs, they're always listening to the song. They're doing the right thing.
Isn't it a representation of the chords, right?
apparently lute tablature is quite old. I mean, it predates a lot of the modern notational, like the the standardized notation that we have, and it makes perfect sense. Oh. Anyways, I mean, that's a whole episode into itself.
Yeah. The bass player in my band, he's like talking to himself. He was trying to learn this lick was, that was his lick. And he had to be walked through it note by note. Right? And I'm going,
I got it.
jingle all the way, how many places has it? Bum, bum, bum. It's that misoto. I don't know how he learns all these other tunes. It's just by ear, but he got stuck, and the way he had to get it worked out because he doesn't read. He just, and he's, I don't know how they learn all these tunes faster than I can. And I'm the guy with the PhD and all the audiation training and like da 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 da, and I'm the last guy to learn the tune.
I mean,
it's bizarre to me. So he's saying go up a half step. Go up
like
a whole step, and then back to home. And it's like, what's home again? It's like C.
Yeah, that's painful.
And it was like, but like he's learned all these tunes, he knows all the bass lines, so he got stuck here, and he couldn't. The way he had to get out of it was like that. So I'm kind of like, boy, how great is it to learn all those tunes by ear the way he does, and then like, what's missing? What would learning sequences do to this guy if he? I mean, he already hears it. He's got the oral. He's got the huge listening vocabulary of all these tunes.
Mm.
And I don't know. It's just so much out there. Having had a break and then a week back at school, and
you had a week back now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's just my mind is swimming with possibilities, different ideas. Now I got to trim them down because I'm overloaded as it is to just do the projects I have.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like par for the course, right?
Yeah, I got to add more. What do you do when you have too much? Add more. Give work to the person who is the busiest, not the person who has free time.
Yeah, they tend to prioritize stuff a little better. So we want to talk about bass.
Bass.
I'm a little revved up about this.
It's all about it.
Had a conversation earlier with someone about it briefly, but I mean, the long and short of it is what I see when I have transfer students or when I encounter guitarists, classical guitarists, jazz guitarists, even ones that are very good, it's so rare that people are audioing the bass lines. I mean, I see it more in piano because often people do actually learn to play the left hand, which is typically playing the bass lines. People are learning that on its own, like hands separate. And while they do that, if they're learning music correctly, they're kind of learning to audio the bass lines. I've never met a guitar student, even ones that are very good improvisers, that when I say, hey, just like sing me part of the bass line or just play part of the bass line, not even sing it, just forget the rest of the voices, they just stare at me.
Yeah, let's define bass line now, because I've rebuked that term as a replacement for root melodies, because it's not. A bass root melody is a sort of bass line, but a bass line in the vernacular is what the bass is playing. A root melody is the roots of all the functions played in rhythm, with the melody.
Yeah, so in this example, I mean, I'm talking about both of those things. I encounter people. I
That-
don't encounter musicians that are playing, instruments that can play multiple voices who have really spent time digesting the actual bass lines of the pieces they're working on. And if you can't do that, I mean, what you're talking about goes with it. If there is a root melody that's outlining the functions, which there pretty much always is, that is also just thrown in the garbage,
Yeah, bass lines are either root melodies with added tones or melodies that move into and out of functional tones.
Yeah, and we'll get into that a bit because we're starting to talk about like counterpoint when we talk about that. It's basically the tune has the melody in the bass and the harmonies weaving in and out within there.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you see in MLT as a community is very open and supportive of this idea of actually getting people to sing, what you're calling root melodies. And I've seen other, great music teachers highlight this, but it is often just not covered in the sense that, people on the guitar are learning chord progressions. And I always teach even my pop guitar students, people that aren't playing jazz or classical music, you have to be able to sing that root melody in Eric's language or that bass line. Because if you don't, like, there's something really weird going on here. But it's often not taught,
When on guitar you're playing is the lowest sounding, string that's being, twanged, is sometimes that's just a note in the chord, not necessarily the root. Or
pretty much, if you're playing pop guitar, almost all the voicings and the inversions that people use have the root of the bass, the root of the chord, root of the function in the lowest voice.
Yeah.
But not always. You can think of some Beatles examples in terms of like the really poppy stuff that doesn't. But
so you got inversions going on.
Yeah, you got actual inversions.
In addition to extra tones between the harmonic functions.
Yeah, and that's part of what's going on here is like when you have, let's say you have a song that's just 1 and 5, and the bass is truly just playing the root melody. There's no extra tones. Every time the bass plays a note, it's playing the root of the function. Then, there's a step beyond that where there's root melodies and they start making passing tones to other.
At that point, I call that bass line.
Exactly. And then I would say beyond that is where there's sometimes you get the root of the function. Sometimes you have passing tones. And then sometimes you have tones that are still part of the function, but they're inversions, right? So you might have me in the bass of a 1 chord, and that's a whole nother
or
thing
just
to get into.
A weird note in the bass while everybody else is playing a different function. And
sure.
Right? So what do you call that? Like you got an F in the bass and an E minor chord at the top.
Yeah, if I heard that, I'm thinking sharp 11.
Because it's going somewhere that this is going to make sense. Or, that's a bad example. I don't know. Where's it going? I don't know. I don't have examples of it because I don't practice them.
Yeah, and this opens the door. This opens the door to like there's many different ways of even labeling this stuff. You could, these slash chords. At some point.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. But I don't know songs that have them in them.
Yeah, a really common one is where you have the 1 chord. Over the 5 chord, they'll just put something like. So that. It's the tritone sub, but it's over the 5, and it sounds like a mouthful, but it's actually quite easy to identify in a song, and it's super common. It's really pretty in minor too. It's super cool in minor.
Yeah, the Neapolitan is what we talked about this morning, quickly too.
It's funny. I learned to hear all that stuff before I ever heard it labeled Neapolitan, and so I'm not opposed to that name. It's just for me, I just call it what it is. Like it doesn't. The Neapolitan thing seems to.
It's a
it
flat
just seems
two.
like a lot.
Right?
Yeah.
Is it?
Exactly.
Does it work the same as a tritone substitution?
Yeah, that's what you start seeing happening. Is like sometimes people go. mean, it's the same thing. There's just different things going on in the bass.
We were talking about the Neapolitan, rather than going down a half step to tonic, that you go from the Neapolitan to dominant. And that was, Beethoven and some Mozart, dramatic.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of let's cover some ground here, because you're in a different setting than I am, and I like that we have these complementary contexts that we find ourselves in. You have group classes, and you're teaching, typically younger audiators than I am. Sometimes I have the young ones, but
8-9 years old and under.
Yeah. So what are you doing to help people? You have songs that you're playing, you have repertoire, and how are you sprinkling in these, root melodies, bass lines, whatever you want to call them?
I don't sprinkle them in. Every tune we sing, we pretty much learn the bass to when they're ready. And when they're ready, it's really easy to teach them the root melodies. Mm-hmm. And, it's just like learning a tune, but it's a lot easier, I think. You don't have the words, right? You don't have the words. It's like a rote song, except the song is just the roots. But I add rhythm to these roots so that the roots are stylistic. So it's not like it is in developing creativity in improvisation books. Azara has, just whole notes and half notes kind of thing for his root melodies.
Sure.
And they don't have any rhythmic drive to them. They're not wrong, they're good, but they're more fun for children.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. And I don't know if he's got another series of it, and I didn't buy it. I don't know it. I don't know if he starts to use bass lines in addition to the root melodies to go beyond just the roots. I don't know if that's happening. I know that the recordings have bass lines. That some of the recordings that he's had in are real, jazz bass lines.
Sure. Yeah.
To songs and stuff. And he's a phenomenal musician. I wish I had half of his chops on the keyboard, but piano. He's amazing. And he's how I was jettisoned. It took a few years, but I used his stuff, and I said, "Where else can we go?" And I didn't really know where it was going to lead, but I was just, we should learn the functions to our songs. That's like a no-brainer to me. And then so I started teaching functions based on, the epiphany I had of like melodies and, tones and rhythm aren't the be-all end-all. Tonal patterns and rhythm patterns. I said, okay, now we're going to learn functions. When we learn functions, how is it easy to learn them? Well, in the tunes, right?
Yeah, and actually this example you gave earlier with your friend, this example of someone not basically identifying that that's the skeleton of what's going on. They're hearing it, syllable by syllable.
Yeah, he's an anomaly. How much he can learn and play and how good he is on bass. And yet, when there's something he's stuck on, it's really interesting to watch these guys, say, well, it's a half step up and now it's a whole step. They're totally theory-laden when they have to figure something out. Otherwise, it's just natural and it's just oral boom on the bass, and that's it.
Yeah, fair enough. It's funny when you see stuff like that,
Yeah, and I can't say that he doesn't have lots of music aptitude and all that. He just right. I don't know what would happen if learning sequence ever occurred. If learning sequence activities were ever brought to these guys or people like that early in life, what these what the outcome would have been.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, what's been your experience in the wild with jazz musicians? Because basically, whenever I find ones that are good at improvising, like really good at improvising over tunes, and I said, "Hey, can you just play the bass line and improvise on it?" I mean, they're having a blast. They like they are having a good time.
Mostly, and I'm not playing with elite players, but I'm playing with very good players. People a lot better than I am in terms of their improvisation ability too. Although it's kind of subjective. You get tired of your own stuff after a while. They know what's going on. Mm-hmm. They can sing. I'm sure we could stop playing and sing a lot of what's going on. Not always. I think some people are instrumental bound, but
yeah, for sure.
But it's the one thing that I really, really try to focus on when I'm playing is not anything else, but the horn player next to me, in addition to, because I want to harmonize with them, I don't want to play the same thing unless we're supposed to, but is the bass, bass player or the tuba player.
And not being able to audiate the bass line. I mean, I've been saying sing, but I mean, when I say someone can't sing the bass line, I mean, what I really mean is they can't prove to me they can audiate the bass line. But someone not being able to audiate the bass line, like I've seen this with so many teenage jazz guitar students, especially, like they're improvising over crazy tunes and they have no hope at all of playing or audiating the bass line. And to me, that it just doesn't make sense, because how are you going to improvise something if you can't hear the functions that go with, like, the actual context that you're...
It's the fundamental quality, even beyond melody. Mm-hmm. It's the anchor. If you don't have one person, besides you in a group, it's the bass player. Just one. If you want to, it's like what Ornette Coleman had, him and a bass player. Mm-hmm. There's a jazz vocalist who never, as far as I know, recorded with anything other than a bass. And think about that as a vocalist. It's tremendous. And you have to have a bass player that can do stuff that most bass players can't. Mm-hmm. Which is not just lay the foundation, but play around with the melody in addition, and the bass line. But it's the most fundamental, right? If you go to any jazz, the first thing I recognize, if the bass and the drummer aren't a perfect match, they need to be one person.
Sure.
And if they're not, then it's like, it doesn't matter what you put on top of it, it won't thrill me the rest of the night. I won't be as grooving as I would be. No matter who's the sick...
The soloist.
Yeah, whoever the sick person that's on stage is playing, if the bass and the drum aren't synthesized and grooving together, it kind of leaves me, wanting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is just a larger point about harmony and improvising, in terms of, a lot of people learn to improvise at first with like a pentatonic scale or something. They're given, there's a... And that's fine for making melodies and stuff, but the whole problem with that approach is if you don't have some kind of awareness of the form of whatever you want to call it, the root melody or the bass line, you can't actually be harmonically specific. So I'm not saying that if someone goes, I don't know what chords you were hearing over that. I heard like ones and fours going by in my mind, but often when students are improvising with like pentatonic scales, for example, they're not actually hearing anything except the one chord behind everything that they do. And I mean, that's a good start, but not being able to weave and navigate through functions is a big problem out there with improv. And it's a hard skill to develop.
Yeah, 2 nights ago, we played 4 or 5 new tunes in band rehearsal. Mm-hmm. And it's like, Eric, take a solo. And I already found where, the resting tone was. That's all I care about. It's like, give me the resting tone. And then I go from there and let my ears win the day. But when I'm uncertain, I am totally all over that pentatonic kind of sound because it fits, and it's part of the style of the rhythm and blues. There's not a lot of fanciness going on, although I'll put it in there. I'll do a flat 3 or sharp 9, whatever you want to call it, and and I'll do some some notes that'll rub against the harmony on purpose around that pentatonic stuff, but I am relying heavily on what's easy because I'm learning the tune.
Yeah, and I'm talking about the practice room, right? Like if you're on the bandstand, there's a crazy tune you can't handle. Keep yourself alive.
That's how we practice: is we play the tune until everybody knows the ending or everybody's figured out the chords.
Yeah.
And I never figure out the chords with them. I hear them and react to them. I don't think theoretically when I'm playing in a band.
Sure.
At all.
No,
I throw caution to the wind that way. I think it's better when I do, and there's something about a tune that I can memorize and sit down and write all the chord progressions through the whole tune. It's not a bad thing to know. I start thinking theoretically when I know that stuff sometimes, and I don't have the instinct that I might, or I don't take the chances that I would take if I didn't know the chords. And I know not the chords, but I know the progression, or I know the functional. I know the direction. I know where the tune is going, so I'm going there, and how it gets there, I can mess with that as long as I know where I'm going, right? So in a way, I'm playing ignorant at some level, because I can't do both, because once I start thinking theoretically, the wrong side of my brain takes over.
Yeah, and I would say that's not really
when I'm improvising.
The place for it. Yeah. When you're improvising, I mean, I very much like that high, jumping in, taking risks, relying on what's relying on what you can actually audiate and just pushing it out there. But hopefully, in your audiation training, your practice, you've laid the foundation for the things to come out that you like the sound of. I mean, essentially, because the whole point of all this is we're playing sounds that we like. I mean, that's the whole point of doing all this stuff. But I agree that you can when you're improvising, even if you're using air quote MLT stuff, you're not using theoretical understanding, you can still get into this weird cycle where
I don't know that there is MLT stuff for the stuff we're talking about. I think we're creating it. I don't.
Yeah, and I mean that's why that's why I keep
Chris's
shifting the conversation.
Is the closest, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But it's lacking something.
Yeah, and that's why I'm always shifting the conversation towards this secondary dominant thing with tritone subs, because I really think that needs to be fully mapped out using MLT methods, and I think it's the natural next step in harmony, based off of where people in the MLT community are with what they're working on. But I mean, what I'm getting at is you can be thinking okay, there's a sharp 4 chord, sharp 11 chord coming up. I got to bang on that, and then it's going to go to this. You can go really theoretical with it. But even if you're using solfege and you're saying, okay, there's a 5 chord and I got to hit the fa here. It's the same process. I mean, it's basically the same crap that you're doing. It's just one is using movable do. So you can use movable do in a way that's not really designed for what Gordon was talking about.
When you get to theoretical understanding, they're one and the same, because that sharp 4 is audiated. It's not necessarily a theoretical thing.
This is what I was talking about with a teacher this morning, because I've gotten emails recently from people saying okay, on the podcast you're talking about these chords, dominant 7ths with sharp 4s or whatever I'm talking about, but 99% of the time when I'm talking about those chords, the label, yeah, we could say it's a theoretical. I know why it's called a sharp 11, and that's the theory, but I'm just using it as a label for something I can audiate. And so there's a bit of...
And so we got to... And so let's distinguish this again, because sometimes it gets messed up, is theoretical understanding is not music theory.
Fair enough. I mean,
music theory can live on its own without audiation. And I did that through, how many years of college? 8 or 10, right? I could write in the style of Mozart, and I had no idea.
Sure.
Right? That I knew what kind of chords he could use, and I knew he used some inversions and this and that. Here's a melody. All right, write something in the style of Mozart. And this is how you get into graduate school, okay? Or how I got out, well, or both. They tested you on.
I feel better and better now for not going.
And so I make something up, and I've got enough, Mozart in my brain that the rhythmic patterns of the harmony, right, and like that you guess at. But I wasn't audiating it. I was just writing down notes that made sense to the melody, and that it was a 1-4-5, 5-6-6, something, nothing special. Because Mozart didn't do a lot of special, except that everything he did was special because it was so honed in terms of instrumentation. Ridiculous. and surprises and all that. But here's an 8-bar melody. I'm not going to have a development section. So what was I saying, or what's important here is,
well, I mean, this music theory versus theoretical understanding.
Using music theory, and but theoretical understanding, once you're a pretty proficient improviser, and you've written, 50 pieces, song, it doesn't have to be a huge thing, but once you've written in the vocabulary you understand, and can, compose for whatever whatever you want, band, orchestra, jazz band, vocal with piano accompaniment, just piano by itself, whatever. Once you can compose that stuff and you've stretched yourself out, once you go into theoretical understanding, now you have the reasons for why these things work, why these things make sense. And so the labels, any of the labels that we call theory, could be just labels like, Neapolitan. That's a label. It's just a label. I could teach my kids Neapolitan next week. And in 4 or 5 months, my 2-year-olds would know Neapolitan. Mm-hmm. That's not a high priority for me right now, but
sure.
But Neapolitan isn't a theoretical concept. It's a label to what it is that I've taught them to audiate. And so, right? So exactly. There's difference between Neapolitan, that you learn it by somebody writing it up on the board and analyzing stuff. But if you can't hear it, right? So theory isn't necessarily theory, and I think this starts to fold in a little bit into why you use names of notes at some, when you get to a certain point, that because you're already audiating the functions of those names of notes represent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I don't chastise you anymore, but I still wonder
we've come a long way.
I still wonder when it's going to be that I enter that world. I don't think I have the kids long enough that I want to. I want to keep them at the lower levels longer, because it'll give them a richer vocabulary, a wider base to grow their improvisation before they get to theoretical.
Yeah, and I still, as a constant reminder, I still think when you get into this kind of secondary dominant tritone sub jazz land, I mean, a lot of classical composers are using these changes too. It's not just jazz people. I still maintain that using movable do and pitch letters and a fixed pitch system will outperform using only one or the other. Because that's what I've seen.
Yep.
But I haven't seen using only one outperform using both.
Yeah. By the way, after a whole month or more of not doing any, so I crushed, Ray, Ra, Do, and Mary Had a Little Lamb, or London Bridge, and I crushed that into, and I throw it in haphazardly once in a while, but in December, all I do is we harmonize songs that they know from outside world, but don't necessarily know the functions to. And we go through, all the, the chords in most of the Christmas songs are just, there's just 4 or 5 or 6 of them. There's not a lot, and the kids already know them from other songs. So we go through them, and it's fun because it's Christmas time. And I also throw in the Dreidolf, Rudolph and Dreidel together in the A sections. They match up, and then right, and then the form of those songs and stuff like that we go into. But I didn't do any of that. And when my kids came back for their first class just yesterday, having had a week and a half, 2 weeks off, I played this stuff and they totally remember it, but they don't have the label yet. But they like, yeah, that's that. I remember that. But what's it called? And he's like, and just sing Ray Ra Do. And they go, that's it. Like they have a total recognition. So the identification's missing. So it's just a matter of time. But they've got tritone substitutions pretty down pat that way in terms of their oral understanding. And that to me is like, well, I never went for that before.
And this group started in September?
Yeah, but I didn't start that until November. So this basically I did it hardcore for a little over a month.
Yeah, I mean that's a good
and that's
a good frequency.
6 and 7. And I have them for an hour once a week. But I dancing, and I'm doing all these other songs, and I'm doing we started notation in my one group, and they're already doing creativity. They can't write it yet, but whatever they say, I write down, and then we go back and read it without my help. I want, I said, here's do, da, dee, do. I don't even say that. I said, do you remember this one? Yeah, is that duple or triple? And it's like, well, I know it has a dot, so is that do, da, dee? And I'm like, yeah. Okay, so do, da, dee, do. That's what I wrote that down. It's like, yeah, that's what it is. Can you make up one? And you can use do to da. You can use, do da to do to da to dee ta. Use whatever you want. What do you want? And he goes, do to da dee. So I write do to da dee. Now what else do you want? He goes, do da dee ta. Oh, so I write that. And then he says do to da ta dee ta. Okay. And then what? And he says, do. It's like, okay. And I said, read it. And he goes, do ta da dee, do da dee ta do ta da ta dee ta do. Like, he never read that pattern before. I don't barely remember teaching him these patterns, other than explaining, here's what duple looks like, and you guys know this. Here's what triple looks like. Duple is do da dee, and did I say duple? Duple is do day, and triple is do da dee, and that's it. Now you can add the tuz. And there's more we can do. But then by the next line, I said, what do you want now? He said, D. Really? You want D? I said, awesome. So do-da is not there? He says, no. D-do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this kid's got... He plays the piano and picks songs off the radio a little bit, and he's 7.
I'm not surprised.
He's way, look up here and look up here. I asked you to look up here because you got to see it. You can't. And he says, pizza balls, or he'll say something just to throw you off, just to be like a little bit of a nag all the time. And I can't keep him. His mom comes up to Danny. Listen to me. I shouldn't have used his name. Listen to me. Listen to me. Mr. Eric is trying to teach you something. Can you pay attention? He can't pay attention. And this kid is off the scale. I said the reason he can't pay attention is he's too smart. He's got 100 things going on at the same time. as my guess.
Yeah, I mean, if he's not feeling challenged, he might try to get some more stimulation.
That's why I went into creativity right away with him. His other classmates weren't there yesterday, but it's like you just push as far as you can, and so we're way off the baseline topic, but
I mean, this does connect to the baselines too. I mean, in a way, just challenging yourself. And
well, I went to the xylophones, and I said, I'm going to play Mary Had a Little Lamb, and you play do, 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 so, do. All right, so here we go. So he's like, well, this is too easy. I said, now make up your own rhythms that go with it. And he had to, so there's a couple times where he changed in the wrong place, but he corrected himself. And he never played xylophone. He plays piano, but the coordination to go left, right, da 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 dum 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 bump, right, or da 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 dee dee dee, right. He's doing his rhythmic creativity over a bass line. So in a way, that's improvisation. Most basic level of improvisation is playing the roots with just rhythms. Different rhythms.
Yeah, often when I teach guitar players to improvise, we just learn the bass line to a song. I mean, it's basically the root melody. Sometimes there's, something that's in a weird inversion, but it's pretty much always the root melody. And then we learn to throw some cool rhythms on that. And then we just learn to approach things by half step below. Yeah. I mean, and that one people pick up really well, actually, because once you have a sense of the harmonic form, those half steps, they're so easy to audiate.
It is. And for this
and
guy...
what Eric, what are the half steps? They're the opening into hearing the 5 of something and the tritone sub of that. So if you're approaching whatever function by a half step, I mean, that's just a 5 chord. That's the third of the 5. I mean, again, that's the way I hear it.
It's whatever they have experience with, just translated into instrumental performance, and you don't even have to use verbal association.
Or if you approach root melodies, if you approach root tones from a half step above, that is the tritone sub of 5 of whatever that thing is. And you just learn to hear that. But, I mean, that's such a good place to start for improv is, and that's really what bass players are doing. Good bass players. They're just doing things like that. And they have a million tricks up there. Up wherever they keep the tricks, but they have them.
So in less than 10 minutes, and it might have only been 8 because I had to get him stopped goofing around on the xylophone first. We played major, minor, duple, and triple with improvised bass lines, improvised root melodies. Mm-hmm. In terms of the rhythmic improvisation.
But that's what improv is, right? You're constraining yourself somehow, and especially harmonically, whether or not you choose to burn that to the ground and do something outside. But in that sense, it's not even really outside, because if you're actually audiating the form of the harmony and you choose to go outside, it's not really outside in terms of the sense that it's like nonsense. It's still being related in context in your mind. I mean, that's really what improv is, and that's why I make this case over and over. If you can't improvise over, something like 1 and 5 in a simple harmonic form like that, how are you going to start playing over Stella by Starlight or just crazy bebop tunes? It's just not in the cards. But people try to do it, man. Like you were probably forced to do it in university.
But it was. Yeah, I don't even talk about that. But he'd never played on xylophone before.
Sure.
Not in my class. I don't know if he's got one. I don't think he has one at home. He has a keyboard at home. But he's not improvising rhythms to match a harmonic form at home. He's trying to figure out melodies, and he does harmonies a little bit, thirds or finding notes that go together, and he messes around. But he's pretty serious, and when he concentrates, he's ridiculous. But I'm just saying, I don't know that I didn't teach him all the steps between what he needed, to get to what he did yesterday. Mm-hmm. You gotta, I think one thing that we do is we don't we don't bridge enough. We used to call it spiraling up. Yeah. And we also don't add content fast enough. If you're only doing tonal patterns in major, for 3 weeks. That's an issue for me. Or only tonal patterns in minor. Even if you're doing 4 or 5 functions, it's still a problem for me. You got to do
this is related to what I was.
Just push the content. Is it's not any harder. All they're doing is repeating, either oral or verbal associated. All they're doing is repeating. So, and these kids are learning. Some of these kids are learning so quickly. And this is one example. I don't know what would happen if I had 90% of his attention versus 30
or more of his time, right?
Yeah, whatever. But
I mean, this is related to what I was talking about in the beginning of the episode, where like often people have this mindset where they have to go big and do like 100 repetitions of something. I mean, people have this mindset like it's better to go deep than wide. But if you think like some of this stuff only needs a couple of repetitions to get in your ear and just repeat it consistently, you're better off covering a wide array of content. I mean, can you imagine if we did this with vocabulary when kids are young? Like, we don't teach them new words rapidly. We just try to make sure they master certain words, and we block new words from entering their vocabulary. It'd be insane. That's not how people learn. They're bombarded with words, and some of them get, retained and some don't. But in that sense, it's better to go wide than deep, because you're not really learning more by going deep.
Should I be playing giant steps, every week the same way I play, some Bach or some or whatever else I play? Right?
Yeah, maybe little.
What are we not giving them that they can handle? I mean, whatever Coltrane grew up in, I'm sure it wasn't sequenced. From birth, or prenatally up until. By the way, I'm really, really super strong on what's happening prenatally, musically. I've never had a kid who showed up like early or strong in their musicianship before they're 2 or 3, and I've never gone to the mom and found out that she didn't do much. It's like, oh yeah, I was dancing in the ballet, or I was dancing, or I was, singing in church, 3 nights a week and Sunday, and like, there's never when I see a kid, has they not had solid prenatal experience. Now, there's this video that was going around where there's a 1.5-year-old. He's now 2 and some months old. He's playing chords.
Oh, I think I've seen this kid.
Yeah, this Russian
this, like,
kid.
Baby.
Oops, this Russian kid. Yeah, and his big sister's got him on his lap, and she's playing triads, going up in half steps, and he's copying. And
he can play triads with 3 fingers.
He's doing triads with 3 fingers at 1.5 years old, between that and 2. And he's in C, and he chooses the F sharp, and that's where he ends, with that sharp 4 over it, because it's just a sweet sound for him, I guess. It's like, and that just killed me. Like that was like, that's cool. That's where I end. And, you watch the reaction in his face and what else he's doing, but he's really serious concentration. It's like, so I'm trying to get a hold of the family there. And then there's a group in Lisbon, or not Lisbon, but in Portugal, it might be Lisbon, where these high school kids, and then they've got even younger. And I wish I could improvise half what these kids can do. They're so young. I'll put links in the down for this group. My goodness, it's so tight, and it's so, the improvisations are stellar for a college kid. And here they are 10, 12 years old, and they're, maybe not as technically proficient, but what they're after and what they're playing, oh my God, it's outstanding. Like, where I got it, so I'm gonna get a hold of the director of this music school. I absolutely got to find out what's going on, because he's doing something I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, that's the that's the name of the podcast is right. Like, we're trying to figure out what's going on out there.
Yeah. It makes me crazy, because I've been working my whole life, and these guys are just doing it naturally or whatever, right? So you just grow up in a family where your sister puts you on your on her lap. listening to these, plus, of course, they're both, I'm sure the music school is getting kids that are already like passing the muster on everything before they.
Yeah, there could be a filtering process at
definitely.
play, right?
There's definitely a filtering process, but still.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't diminish.
It doesn't mean you
skill.
can find 30 kids in Portugal and put them together and have a rockin' band.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I mean, it's sick how much it swings. And the articulations and everything. Oh my God. It's so great.
That's where it is, man. I mean, I'd rather have someone.
Bass lines.
rather have someone phrase well and make a technical error here and there than someone who has no technical errors, but the phrasing is, shit.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great thing to keep in mind when you're practicing, When I'm performing this piece, what actually matters. The technique is great. I mean, that's a big value of mine, but the very last thing I want to talk about with bass lines is just this ability to audiate two things that are going on at once. And it's, I've talked about this here and there on the podcast, but like, let's say you have a 2-line, like little Bach convention or something, almost immediately someone's ear is gravitating towards the higher toned melody, and they'll kind of hear, the bass when the theme is thrown in the bass. This is natural. But I do find that a lot of people aren't purposely training, moving their ear from one melody to another at will. And even before that, just being conscious, like, can you actually just hear both voices going on at the same time? Because I encounter so many piano players who I'm convinced are not hearing what their left hand is doing, like basically at all, other than rhythmically.
What they have to do is stop, dance, and sing the bass line, or the left hand melody. Move and sing that left hand melody. The right hand melody probably don't even need to do it because you're saturating your audiation with that.
Exactly.
If you're beyond playing it just technically, and let's assume that they've got most of the audiation of the functions in that.
Mm-hmm.
At the oral level, or if they're just plunking notes, which is the thing. That's why you got to sing. Pianists have to sing, and pianists have to get off the bench and move.
Well, and same with guitarists. I mean, like I was saying before, it's common for piano players to at least practice hands separately, but guitarists typically, they're playing like a jazz piece or a classical piece that has an actual active bass line, not just something that's very obvious. Typically, people don't put time into learning how to audiate that and how to play it on its own. And, bringing this back to this phrasing point, if you can't audiate what you're playing on your instrument, how are you going to actually phrase it? How are you going to actually put articulation? Because I see when people can't audiate the bass lines that they're playing, they make really weird choices about like when they cut off bass notes and when they put staccatos. Like there's virtually no staccatos on things intentionally because they're not actually audiating it. So you can't shape things if they're not being tracked by your, musical mind. And I get really fired up about this because I think this can really level your playing up. Because I'm not just talking about guitar players and piano players. If you're a trumpet player and you're in a concert band and you're not hearing what's going on next to you, bass line aside, I mean, just like hearing other melodies, which I think is really common in concert bands, everyone's like playing their stuff. And then when they hear a recording of their own band, they're like, whoa, all this other stuff was going on.
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like this topic we could talk about for like 5 hours. Like there's a lot in here.
There's all kinds of stuff that we've interwoven into this conversation.
Well, I hope everyone's off to a good new year. And, as always, my door is open. If anyone has any questions, comments, feel free to shoot me an email. My email's in the description below. I do offer, I've been calling it audiation coaching, but if you have, if you're a teacher or a guitarist or a piano player and you want to, especially harmonically, you want to whip yourself into some shape, shoot me an email and we can talk about, setting up a plan for you.
Yep. It'll be in the show notes along with links to these videos and my book and eventually course dates for harmonic learning sequence. And we've got requests for how do we learn transposition or not what did she want? She wanted
Modulations?
Modulation, thank you. What do they want me to teach? I can't think of the word. Yeah, modulations. We got up early for that. But yeah, if there's interest and stuff like that, we are all ears. We'd love to hear from people.
What's going on, Eric, in terms of your courses? Are you offering?
One class is completely full,
Cool.
and I'm thinking about opening up another class in UK friendly time. So Eastern time, it would be 1 o'clock or so.
Yeah, I highly recommend people, jump into one of those courses if they can. I think the
Nobody's complained yet.
Nice. Well, I mean, there you go.
I think the people that are complaining are the ones reticent to try it.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean,
It's outside the box. Beau, it doesn't fit. It's not written about.
Yeah, if you're not hated a little bit in your time, isn't there something wrong?
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know.
I'm gonna love being hated rather than rich and happy.
There you go. All right, till next time.